So here's how it is, guys. I'm Ward, we know that. This is Sue Naegle. She's done a few things. I'm sure you all know, but I'm going to break it down real quick so we're all on the same page. Sue, of course, graduated from Indiana University in communications, so give it up for that. She then began her storied career in the UTA mailroom, ascended to be one of the most powerful lit agents in town, representing some of the greatest screenwriters in the industry. And then she continued her ascent, becoming a partner and director of television at UTA. You have a few little shows you helped out on, like
true.
The Bernie Mac Show, 6 Feet Under, True Blood, right? And it only made sense, launching those great shows with HBO, then to go work for HBO and be the president of HBO and usher in the greatest slate of television in the history of television. We're talking about little shows like Boardwalk Empire and Game of Thrones and Girls and Veep and Enlightened. We have this, and how many nominations and Emmys? Hundreds, an unprecedented number. Then she launched her own shingle, Naegle Inc., and then Naegle Inc. joined forces with Annapurna, one of the juggernauts in the industry, bringing the most creative, interesting voices to your television movie screen. So please, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for your fellow Hoosier, Sue Naegle!
I'm so surprised to see all these IU alums at a bar. It's weird.
So Sue, what's it feel like to be here amongst your people? Many of them who were in your shoes when you graduated from Indiana University or were about to.
Well, I know a few of them, and they've been warned not to heckle. But it's fun. It's fun to see this many people from IU living in LA, to be honest.
Well, I believe the tie that binds us all is this love for this magical place, the greatest university on earth, and as special it is to be back there and be a student there. I think that connection is even more valued and important when we're thousands of miles away.
Exactly, and it is a special place with a very special culture. And people that are from the Midwest or have spent time in the Midwest at school, they have a different spirit. And that spirit, I think, actually works very well in LA.
Ours is better than the other Midwestern schools.
Of course.
Ours is definitely the best.
Of course, go IU.
So let's start off with what's going on right now. What's your day-to-day life? Besides going to get giant fish tanks for your daughter, what fills your days?
My days are probably like a lot of people's days. They start in a panic, reading email and reading the news. I get up usually very early and I read in the morning because that's when my head is most clear and my house is most quiet because I have 3 kids.
Yes, they're asleep still.
They're asleep. So I read, I attempt to exercise, I think about it. And then I usually, go to a breakfast. And today I'm trying to think where I started my day. It's some conference calls with work in New York. And there's a variety of calls. I went to the dermatologist. That's not very exciting.
I noticed your pores looked great.
Thank you. I'm actually now at the age where they're burning stuff off my face. But,
better safe than sorry.
Yeah. And then I went into my office, had a bunch of meetings, sit down with people in my group. I do a lot of internal meetings as well as external meetings because I think it's really important when you work with a group of people that you check in with them. So I'm a big fan of the in-person check-in. How are things going? What's working for you? What's not working for you? Had a very feisty legal meeting and then spent the afternoon in casting.
Do you enjoy the casting?
I do. I really enjoy the casting. It's a very hopeful process. You're always hoping someone's going to come in and be great or do something unexpected. And I also really feel for the actors because they are...
That was supposed to be a dance break, everybody. You missed your cue.
I feel for the actors because it's very stressful for them. So we try to have a very warm room and try to make it very easy and give people time to do their thing and do it again if they want to. And so you're always wanting to come out of there going, oh my God, I feel like this person is the part. I mean, that feeling and wanting that feeling doesn't go away. It's pretty great.
It sticks with you, and that's when you know you found your person.
Yeah, and you're excited for the person who doesn't realize that as soon as they leave the room, you're like, yes, yes. It's thrilling.
Well, let's run it back to Rockaway, New Jersey.
That's
where you grew up.
Yes.
I think the first question is, what were your favorite books growing up? Because I know you love to read.
I do.
So where did that start with? What kind of authors and stories?
I was that nerdy kid, like a lot of nerdy kids who work in LA, who just read all the time and watched an excessive amount of TV, completely unpatrolled by my parents.
Good for them.
I know, good for them. They're happy now.
But it was safer then. You couldn't go too many dark places like you
really
can
couldn't.
now.
Fraggle Rock. It was Fraggle Rock time. I read a ton. I think my grandfather got me into Stephen King, probably too early of an age, but I went through Stephen King through my mom's sort of smutty Danielle Steele novels. But I did go through the classics, and I did understanding that there's not very many brand new stories. There's a different retelling of stories, and so I did read sort of all the classic books that you're assigned in school, but also that you elect to read if you like to read. And then I still read all the time. Yeah, it's part of my job. It's probably the best part of my job.
Big part for sure. So you mentioned TV shows, movies. What were a few of your favorites of those growing up that maybe now you realize they influenced you more than you even knew?
I think about it sometimes with casting, because someone will come in and I'll think, oh, that person was on X number of episodes in the mid-'80s. And that's a weird encyclopedia I don't need in my head, but I have in my head. I loved everything. I mean, my parents let me watch Saturday Night Live when I was probably too young. I watched SCTV. I watched, Falcon Crest, Dallas, Love Boat. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I watched all of those classic TV shows, Three's Company, Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, all the way through.
We're all the children of Norman Lear.
Yes, one of the greats.
One of the greats, and probably has 3 shows on right now.
He's still doing it in 96. He's an impressive man.
Incredible. So, when did the flip switch, the switch flip, that you knew, yeah, right? When did the switch flip that you knew you didn't want to just read books, but maybe turn them into TVs and movies? You didn't just want to watch TVs and movies. You wanted to get involved with making.
Yeah, I did want to work with authors initially. And then part of the reason I ended up at IU was because I had a very strong comparative literature program, and I thought that would be a good, before I moved into telecom. And at that time, it was comparative literature also weirdly covered sort of genre films. There was a lot of classes in westerns or science fiction, things like that. But I think I loved then and I love now doing adaptations of really great books, and sometimes of really terrible books because they make better adaptations.
Sure.
But I think at some point I didn't realize, even being at IU, that it's going to be a real possibility to have a career, and you're in Indiana and you can either go to New York, which at the time just really had daytime TV and news, or you could go to LA, which is where most of the production was. And I thought I'd end up in production or doing something with authors. But my first internship was at Orion Classics, which is now Sony Classics. But the people still running it, that were running it then. And that taught me a lot as well. It was really valuable.
Well, let's go back to Bloomington for a moment.
Let's.
What's your favorite pizza in Bloomington?
Don't really like pizza, but not in Indiana. Not in Indiana.
Oh, it's the East Coast bias.
I will give props to the Snow Lion, which I hear is now closed.
Yes. R.I.P. Snow Lion.
R.I.P. Snow Lion. The Runcible Spoon.
Yeah, still an all-time
Nick's.
classic.
St. Bismarck.
There you go. Does that qualify as your favorite bar then as well?
Nick's is my favorite bar. And the Blue Note. Is that the Blue Note? You know, the jazz club. There used to be
the
up on the
Blue Note's
square.
in New York.
Yes.
I know that.
Yeah, no. There's the jazz club that was up on the, or like the music club.
Bluebird. The Bluebird. The greatest music venue on earth.
I would say put it on there. I was thinking on there, but like, I don't know how that sounds.
More sad news.
I wonder if the Dalai Lama still comes, even though the snow lines.
I don't know.
All right, so you're there, and you're a communications major, but also studying comparative lit.
Right.
What did you take from a class or a professor that you still apply when you're out here navigating your way through this crazy business?
I know I'm gonna forget the professor's name, but I did have a really distinctive professor that did teach those genre classes. So
Not Nairmore. James Nairmore?
No, he was really quite unusual, really like a distinctive personality, and I just remember thinking, like, I can't believe that one of the classes that I get to take is studying phantasm. Like, this is odd, but also great. I had a lot of great classes and great professors. I really enjoyed it. I mean, in retrospect, I perhaps should have spent a little bit more time studying.
I don't know, Sue. I think it turned out okay for you.
Worked out.
So you're there and you're thinking about what's next. You go out to Orion Classics, do a little pit stop there, but you come to LA. And like so many iconic, legendary Hollywood careers, it starts in the mailroom of a major agency. Why is that experience so valuable to so many people who have made it in a very big way?
I don't know. I'd ask the room. How many of you guys have worked in an agency mailroom? One. How many people have worked in an agency mailroom? Not very many. It's a really common place to start because it's a little bit like poorly paid. You make nothing, but it's sort of like graduate school. And you can learn a lot. You understand how all the pieces fit together, and you can read Hollywood Reporter every day, or you can kind of start piecing everything and understanding who everybody is and how the business works. And most people don't end up staying an agent or trying to be an agent. They kind of use it as a way to help figure out what it is they might do. So for me, when I started at UT, I was only a year old, and it was 20 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you decide the agent thing is something you want to pursue.
Yeah.
How do you make that leap? And then you end up being such an agent for such high-level screenwriters, really brilliant folks.
Yeah.
How did you approach it strategically to be the agent that those kind of talents deserve, which you clearly were?
Well, so it's a weird story because I really focused in television, and when I was in the mailroom, I was in the mailroom with a guy named Marty Bowen, who went on to produce all the Twilight movies. I was in the mailroom with a guy named David Kramer, who's now the head of the lit feature. He's on the board of directors, UTA. There was and Jason Heyman, who's now a big talent agent, but nobody really wanted to work in TV. It was sort of the, like the ugly department. Like, ugh,
you did it before it was cool.
Exactly.
Right?
I rode the wave.
Yeah. You were like the hipster of TV.
Yeah. But also, I wanted to get out of the mailroom. I wasn't making any money, and I just needed to pay my car payments and my insurance. So I went to work in TV, and it was pretty easy for me because I had watched so much television. I had seen all the episodes of Married with Children or Wonder Years or Seinfeld or whatever was happening at that time. I knew who all the writers were, and then I basically read everything in the script library, so I knew everyone's material. And then I just started kind of putting things together, but my own personal taste. You have to remember this is in the 90s, and in the 90s television was quite traditional.
Still three cameras? And
a lot of it, and great, obviously, Friends, Seinfeld, a lot of great shows came through there, but they were put together in a more traditional way. Things I was just drawn to were people that had a little bit more of an unusual voice.
Okay.
They thought differently, they expressed themselves differently. They could work inside the form, but their original work outside the form was so distinctive that I thought I could maybe spice TV up a little bit by moving some of those people into TV. But the truth is, although they took some great jobs and they really, when they wrote on their own material in screenplay form, it was their best expression. And so I remember at one point being in a staff meeting thinking, like, I haven't gotten Cheers on the air, I haven't found my Seinfeld, but I had a lot of people nominated for an Academy Award. That's pretty good.
And is that something in the agency world where it buys you not only respect, but also, say, the chance to become a partner and run the whole television department? Was it less about having ratings bonanzas, but the people there realizing you saw where this golden age of television was starting to blossom, and they wanted you at the forefront?
Well, I have hopes for the form, because it is, and I still believe broadcast television, although it is very not in vogue right now, is still the biggest platform in the country. So, to me, and for all of we could all talk about television shows that aren't very good, but there are also some that are really excellent, and so it's not a surprise to me that television has become so popular when the storytelling started to expand, when novelists moved into the space, screenwriters moved into the space, people who had come from late night sketch moved into a more traditional narrative space. Like it opens up and it becomes better, it becomes more exciting, but you can't always tell where a hit is going to come from. In fact, you definitely can't tell.
So is the criteria for you to put all your blood, sweat, and tears behind a particular voice or project? Does it just boil down to your passion, or do you have to be somewhat strategic and calculating too?
I really try not to lead with strategic and calculating. In fact, I'm working on a broadcast pilot right now, and we were in the room the other day talking about testing. And when we do the testing, and I just thought, and I didn't think I said, we should not be thinking about testing. If we're thinking about testing, we're already out of like the creative North Star that you need to be in. They were being very practical, and they were right to be, but you have to create something that, everything that I work on, I start with, do I want to see it? It's a really simple question, but it's quite guiding. Because you can put something, if you don't want to see the thing you're working on, you definitely don't want to work on it 60 hours a week.
Right.
And most likely other people aren't going to want to see it.
It's a great guiding star.
Yeah.
Do I want to watch this? No? All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.
I had a meeting recently with Peter Rice, and who came from, obviously he does a lot of amazing things now, but he came through Fox Searchlight, and he told me a really interesting story about, he was saying to him, we were talking about the ones that got away, or which show did you wish had worked better, or movie had worked better, and he said, every time I thought to myself, this is a movie that I don't really get, but I think a lot of people are going to really love it, it doesn't work. And every time I say, I don't know, we're going to spend $500,000 on the John Crowley movie, it's escaped my brain right now, it ends
John
up,
Crowley.
it's not I'm spacing, not Sing Street, not Song 1, guitar musical.
Oh, not once.
Once.
It was once. Okay, once. Who gets credit? Was that Jesse? Of course it was Jesse. The man's an encyclopedia.
But he's, his point of view was we all loved it. It's, who knows? And it wasn't a big purchase price. It was seen like maybe it's a little bit of a smaller movie, and then it does really well. We all know that this, the specific is, the more differentiated something is, or the more something feels individual, it actually can be quite general. Like that's when everybody goes, oh, Stranger Things is my show. That's my show.
There's a universal truth, sensibility at play that if you're locked into something they brought into the room, well, we're all feeling it.
Right.
So there must be an audience there because there's a universal truth. So you got to, now Alan Ball was one of your clients.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you shepherd something like True Blood or 6 Feet Under from the agency side of things to give that life beyond the agency where it needs to show up, which is at HBO?
Well, Alan's always been because he started with original material. He started as a playwright. He's always had this incredible voice and incredible execution. And he was working, I think when I met him, he was working on Sybil Shepherd Show. And I had read all of his plays, so that's how we met. We started working talking about what he would want to create and what he might want to work on the screenplay side. And he did a show for ABC first that didn't end up working called Oh Grow Up, and he had already written American Beauty, so he's at a very interesting moment where you knew that this movie was incredibly special, and this television show, subject to all of the things an ABC television show could be subject to, notes and stuff, and we want it like this, and we want it like that, and it was kind of getting noted to death, and it was losing his original voice in it.
What made it special in the first place?
Yes, and so, American Beauty then kind of emerged, and meanwhile, he had developed a really good relationship with Carolyn Strauss, who was my predecessor at HBO. She actually hired me at HBO, and she was really interested in looking at the business of death and how we, as a culture, don't talk about death. And so they had a bunch of meetings, and from that came 6 Feet Under. Yeah.
Well, that was a really great show.
It's a really great show.
One of many you were going to get going at HBO from two different sides of the equation. So obviously we now have learned how you got hired at HBO, but why did you decide at that moment that was the right move for you in your career?
I think it was a big opportunity to be a programmer, and to be a programmer at a place that I admired so much. I loved working at HBO. I still do. There was a moment where I thought, I've been trained to do this at all. I've never worked at a network. I have no idea if I can do it. But I am also a person who really leads with a lot of questions. Like, I'm the first person to ask a million questions. I never ever walk into a situation like, I got this. I got it. No problem. I'm always like, well, how do you do this? And what do you think about this? And how does this work? And, that's just how I live. But it's also the only way to really learn something.
And were a lot of those questions before you decided to make the leap, or once you got there and you're like, all right, now I
had
better
some
figure
trepidation making the leap, to be honest. It's like, my job at UTA was really secure. I really loved it. I had great clients. I loved my colleagues. I was really happy. I wasn't looking for a change. But I thought, why not push myself and just try something new, and maybe it will work out, so.
Yeah, I think it did.
It did. We had a good run.
Yeah.
They're still having a great run. They're doing well.
But you had a big challenge coming in because The Sopranos and Sex and the City, which were the stalwarts and sort of began the golden age of television, were on their way out. So you had to figure out, all right, how do we follow that up?
Listen, there's a few people that said to me, that place is circling the drain, don't go work there. And there was a lot of people kind of calling it HBO-over.
Haters. They're just haters and trolls. So knowing that was the challenge there, how did you approach it? How were you like, okay, this is how we're going to figure out what's next?
Well, I sometimes, it's a strange way to describe it, but I'm a big baker. So I know if anybody bakes here, if you make a pie crust, not to touch it too much because it's going to be tough and fall apart. Right, so that's how I approach development. I feel like I can spot a great idea, I can spot and understand great execution. I can see it when it's not quite at the execution it needs to be, but it can get there. And I can also see when it's really off base. For whatever reason, truthfully, during my time at HBO, we, for a lot of different reasons, were unable to make everything we wanted to make, and we could have programmed a whole other network, an HBO 2, with great shows. There's so much great development there.
But just so much bandwidth.
Just there's not a lot of real estate, and you have to pick, when you're programming, you have to pick things that work with each other, that can work in a year. You're actually kind of programming a few years out, so there's a limited number of limiteds you can do versus ongoing. So a lot of things that go into it. But the point of view we all had was we had the luxury, they still do, of getting every major creator to walk in the door and try to sell a show to them. So your responsibilities there really have to do with being incredibly gracious, incredibly polite, incredibly fast response time. And because, as I've often said, like, a fast no is the next thing, is the next best thing to a fast yes. Or a slow yes is pretty hard, but probably better than a fast no. But so we just looked at all the material that was there and just made really smart choices and really let the creators alone. We didn't overnote.
Because you'd seen what's happened to Alan at ABC,
yes,
and you didn't want to be the person on that side of the equation. So let's get into Game of Thrones. Were you a George R.R. Martin fan?
No, didn't know anything about the books.
So you dove into those. Was that part of your decision-making process? Is reading the source materials, or was it already a pretty fully formed show idea when it got to you?
You know, it was really my predecessor, Carolyn, who ended up being an exec producer on the show and did an incredible job of the whole run of the show with David and Dan. She had been developing it for a few years, and like I said, it's sometimes can be difficult to get things made for whatever reason. There's a price tag, there's this, there's that, there's timing, you know, it's a very complicated show to shoot.
Yeah, all over the world.
All over the world, but she really believed in the show, and so when I went through all of their existing development, I didn't know how attached she was to it yet. I didn't know that she had spent so much time shepherding it. And I went away for a long weekend and I just took every pilot script that they had in all different areas, really far along drafts, very early drafts, and I just went through everything. And that script was great. I came away from it. There were a lot of great scripts there, let's be clear. But I came back saying, what is this show? Like, I don't know anything about the books. I'm not necessarily a dragon person.
Dragons? They're like clowns for some people. People stay away from dragons.
Stay away from dragons. Yeah, I don't.
It's their loss.
Right. I'm not even one necessarily for a lot of palace intrigue, but I loved that script. And so then we were lucky enough to just get a little momentum, and then my boss, Michael Bardo at the time, really weighed in on helping to get it made. And it was coming, greenlit around the time of Boardwalk Empire, so there was a lot of money going to that show. A little less money going to a little Game of Thrones, but you know, there's two different ways to produce. You know, one was European and one, you know, was shot in New York. So there's a price tag that goes along with that as well.
How do you have such mega shows going on while you're developing all these other great shows that are coming up and not go crazy? Like, what do you do to stay sane?
It's so exciting. There's no time to go crazy.
It doesn't
so
stress
exciting.
you out. You're just
I'm really, really not a micromanager. I really like, my colleagues often joke that when they come in to say, like, well, what do I do here? They're like, every time we come into you, the first thing you say is, I don't know, what do you think you should do? But it's not as annoyingly parental as it sounds. I genuinely am asking, I don't know, like, what's your instinct? I don't know all of the answers. And usually people that are on the ground on something have spent more time trying to figure out the problems. I mean, I give great advice or help them untie a knot. But when it comes to production and a show like Boardwalk Empire, I definitely don't need to tell Marty how to shoot a show.
Right.
And I definitely don't need to tell Carolyn how to produce a show. She had, had worked at HBO for 20 years. So it was really about hiring the right people on the ground, being very careful and supportive in casting, and then there's a lot of people that made that show go, that mostly stayed with it the entire run.
Yeah. Well, it was a magical run.
It was.
But behind Boardwalk Empire and Game of Thrones, you have this really interesting slate of Veep and Enlightened and Girls, which are featuring strong, unique, dynamic female leads and even creators. Was that a conscious decision? Were you ahead of the curve on that too? Or did it just be happen, those were the projects you liked and they were all female driven?
I don't know if I was ahead of I wasn't even thinking about a curve. I knew I'd seen a lot of Armando Iannucci's work and loved it. Talk about somebody with a distinctive voice, right? So, I mean, the bigger question there was, at the time we were casting Julia, she was coming off of Old Christine, so it was like she was such a genius, and it was just whether or not the show was going to get picked up at CBS and what was going to happen. With Enlightened, I had worked with Mike White as an agent, and I knew his work really well also. And he's always ahead of the curve, and not always. I don't think by design always. He is a very porous person. He responds to what he feels in the world and writes about it, and I think he was specifically tuned in to the absence of like a female rage, the absence of an expression of a female rage. And I think the central idea of that show, just what you have to look at every time you develop a show or work on a show, is what are you trying to say? And in that show, what you're really trying to say is it's very, very hard to be good. It's very hard to, you can want to be good, and it can be very difficult to actually do it for a variety of reasons. In the case of Amy Jelko in that show, it's because she's a train wreck.
And just the frustration that comes with not being able to do what you think you're supposed to do.
Right. And with girls, it's like the same thing. Lena came in and she was just wanted to write about her own experience. I was interested in her experience. I was like, I kind of want to know what happens in her day every day. I'd seen Tiny Furniture. I knew she had a really specific voice. And I wanted to be in her world and kind of understand what was happening there. But again, that's letting Lena be Lena, and do her thing and cast the people that she wants and bring in and put the tone together and design it, and direct it. And that's Lena.
And no other place in the world would that show have gotten made in that way. So I think that's such a testament to how you're talking about you empower your other executives or the people working for you as a part of HBO, but as a creative like that, to feel that sort of guidance and somebody shepherding them to be authentic to themselves.
Right.
You must have had all the talent in town coming to talk to you after a run like that. I mean, it was pretty much everybody from all walks of life in town wanting to get on HBO.
Right, it's really exciting. But again, you have to find the right show at the right time. And thankfully for creators, Showtime was starting to become a little bit more robust. Netflix was starting, and then the world exploded, into a lot of different places to tell great stories. I still think HBO is the gold standard, but I'm biased.
Absolutely.
But I'm biased, yeah.
So, after this historic run, more Emmy nominations and wins than any other stretch of television in history, you decided it's time to move on again.
Right.
You launch your own shingle, Naegle Inc.
Yes.
How scary and exciting was that?
Really scary. I regretted the name immediately.
I like it.
It was scary. You're starting over. So you're building. You walk. I knew from switching jobs before, from friends that had switched jobs, you're going to leave your job, and my phone sheet's going to be silent the first day, and it is. It's like you go from everybody in town calling you all the time. But I had been because I had been an agent for so long, and because I had understood what it meant to create and kind of to build something from nothing. Because oftentimes you're doing that as an agent. You're starting somebody's career from nowhere, and you've got to figure it out. I didn't worry about not being able to figure things out. I just worried about trying to find the right things to do, and to find people that were the right people to say it.
So is it as simple as you went from an agent to HBO and now on your own again? Did you feel like you were going from being a seller to a buyer and a seller? So
right.
Again, now I've got to go into the pitch room and make this happen.
Right. But I had sat through a million bad pitches, so I had that covered.
Yeah, you'd seen it from both sides again.
Yeah.
So then tell us how you decide to join forces with Annapurna and Meg Ellison and this just incredible company she's created to foster, again, like you've done throughout your career, really unique voices.
Well, Megan's incredible. She's a real visionary. She's a real rebel in a lot of ways. She looks at rules and always asks, why does that rule exist? Why do we have to do it that way? And she's many times right. And then she built that company off of projects that other people had said no to. And so she's got incredible taste. So we already kind of admired each other from afar, and then we got to be friends. She wanted to start a TV division. I was trying to help her hire someone to start a TV division. And then she was like, why don't you just come over here? And that's how that happened.
And then that way it also offers you more of a bigger company around your own, which helps facilitate everything you want to get done.
You need infrastructure, right? You need business affairs, you need production, you need legal, you need a lot of
real life stuff.
Yeah.
So you can keep your head in the clouds with the fun stuff.
I wish.
Right. No, you got a lot of managing of people, and now you've ascended there, and you're the chief operating officer.
Yeah.
So what's your purview now? What all are you responsible for?
TV, theater, and film.
Done. All of it. Does it all run through you before it gets the green light go? Pretty much every project?
It does, but green lights and television are external, so I don't control the green light.
Right.
Green lights. I'm feeling my top is popping open. Excuse me.
It's a risque crowd here today.
Hello. They're drunk. and the feature side, we do determine the green light, but it depends on what kind of movie we're making and how we're making it.
Okay.
And then on the theater side, it's more about determining where our strategic investment should be or what shows we should take on and move forward. But again, I have incredible people in those departments. I said earlier, I am not a micromanager, so I don't need to tell any of my feature execs how to make a movie or how to pick a movie. I just help them sort it out, and then I give them a lot of encouragement, coaching. I'm like a coach.
Okay. So can you share with us what new project you're most excited about that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, we've Plot Against America coming on in a couple weeks on HBO.
There you go.
That's exciting.
And what's the elevator pitch on that?
It's an adaptation of the Philip Roth book about an alternative history where Lindbergh, who is famously known, in addition to being an incredible aviator, is an anti-Semite.
Not that cool.
Not that cool.
So he becomes president, right?
He becomes president, and then the country becomes slowly polarized, and hate crimes become on the rise. And this neighborhood in Newark, which is based on where Philip Roth grew up, become increasingly sort of rightfully paranoid, and then I won't tell you what happens, but it's really good.
So we got a dystopian vibe a little bit, is that fair?
It doesn't feel dystopian when you watch it. It's pretty, the terror sneaks up on you.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
great. Everybody be watching that. So I guess we're gonna wrap things up here.
Right.
But if you could go back, Sue Naegle's just graduated Indiana University and is making her way in the entertainment industry in LA. What one piece of advice would you give her, or wish that you had gotten back in the day that would have made everything you did just a little bit easier?
I think it's hard when you're in your 20s not to lead with fear. It's very scary. You know, I was far away from my family. I was far away from my friends from school. I did work a lot. And I would say if I went back to my 20-something self, like, it's going to be fine. You're going to be able to pay your bills. Like, stop a little bit. I really charged hard for a long, long time. I still do. But I definitely, I guess you could argue, I just mentioned I had a lot of fun in college, so I shouldn't complain. But I was pretty serious. I was a pretty serious 20-something.
Even though you were named class clown in high school? Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so one last thing that's just right aimed square at what's going on tonight. There's a whole room of great Hoosiers here at all levels of the industry, all capacities, and students. What can we do as a group, along with nights like tonight, to be more effective and helpful and supportive to each other so more of us can have the kind of success you did? How do we make this work like those Northwestern guys doing those USC?
Sure. What about the Emersons?
I don't even want to go there.
It's really networking. I mean, this is obviously really fun. It's fun for everybody, but it's just networking. I mean, you have to. I think about this a lot of times when I put together a crew, and I always say to the people that are hiring, like the director of photography, the costume designer, script supervisor. I mean, I happen to have a big focus on inclusion, especially with women. So I'm always focused on making sure we have enough people of color, making sure that our staff and our crew is really diverse and really inclusive. So I often say, if you're meeting with someone and two people are pretty much equally skilled, if you're hiring a director, especially where the numbers are dismally low per the DGA every year, hire the woman. Just hire the woman. And it's a little bit true about alumni also. I feel like you have to go out of your way to bring, to take care of your fellow alums. You have to make the phone call. You have to, if someone comes in and says, I really want to do this, it's out of my day. It doesn't take a super amount of time. At this point, I know everybody. So it's like, I feel like you have to give a helping hand. You have to help people along. And that's really important. Yes, it's even amongst peers. Not just kind of older people to younger people, but even amongst peers. Like, you have to look out for each other. And I'll tell you, those Northwestern people and the Emerson people really do.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful mafia, so let's step up our game and keep flourishing.
Hoosiers.
Here we go. Well, everybody, let's please give Sue Naegle a huge round of applause.
You're very welcome.